Hello, you're watching BBC News with the latest headlines for viewers in the UK and around the world. US prosecutors charge the parents of a teenager accused of a massacre at a school. They share responsibility because it was the parents who owned the gun he allegedly used.
I will reiterate today that gun ownership is a right, and with that right comes great responsibility.
The first data on the Omicron strain of COVID 1 week after it was declared a variant of concern. Vaccines are less effective at stopping it spreading, but they do make the symptoms of infection less serious. Scientists say they can now use gene editing technology to determine the sex of mice, creating either male-only or female-only litters. An ongoing drought in the Horn of Africa leaves millions without enough food to eat. Animals too are struggling to stay alive.
The drought is still ongoing. You can see this calf, she's too weak to stand up, and so she has to be fed right here.
Hello, welcome to BBC News wherever you are in the world. I'm Shaun Ley. It's very good to have your company. We begin this hour in the United States state of Michigan, where, in a rare move, prosecutors have charged the parents of an alleged school shooter with involuntary manslaughter. This was the scene at Oxford High School on Tuesday. 4 people were killed and 7 injured in the shooting. Ethan Crumbley was charged as an adult with 1 count of terrorism causing death and 4 counts of first-degree murder. Authorities have now issued a fugitive warrant for his parents, James and Jennifer Crumbley. But in a joint statement to the BBC, the family lawyer said the Crumbleys are not fleeing from law enforcement and had left town on the night of the shooting for their own safety. Here's Oakland County prosecutor announcing the charges a little earlier.
It's imperative we prevent this from happening again. No other parent or community should have to live through this nightmare. I have shared previously, and I will reiterate today, that gun ownership is a right, and with that right comes great responsibility. Based on the information and evidence I have received, today I am announcing charges against the shooter's parents, Jennifer and James Crumbley. The charges are as follows. James Crumbley is charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Jennifer Crumbley is also charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter.
Karen MacDonald there, the prosecutor. Well, earlier I spoke to our Washington correspondent Barbara Plett-Usher, and she told me about the significance of these charges.
Extremely rare for parents to be charged in mass shooting tragedies. And in Michigan, there's not even a law that says that parents are required to keep guns out of reach of their children. So it's a very unusual step. But the prosecutor said essentially that the parents were complicit. She said they had contributed to this tragedy and had to be held to account. And she listed a number of things. One is that they bought the gun for the boy as a Christmas present. But then also, in the day or so before the shooting, there were a number of incidents where he had been called to account for troubling behavior, and they did not intervene. So in one occasion, his teacher noted that he had been searching his phone to try to buy ammunition. His mother was alerted. She didn't respond, but she did text him later in a sort of jokey way saying, I'm not angry with you. You just need to learn not to get caught. And then the next morning, then he was again stopped by teachers because they found a drawing that he had made, which was quite alarming, and it showed a gun and a bullet and a dead body or a bloody body, and it said, "The thoughts don't stop, help me." So a very disturbed drawing. He was sent to the principal's office, and his parents were summoned in and told that he needed to get counseling within 48 hours. But they resisted the idea of taking him home, and they didn't check his backpack to see if the gun was there. They didn't even ask him if he had the gun. So he was sent back to the classroom. And then just a few hours later, the mass shooting took place. So the prosecutor was quite hard on the parents, saying that they had a responsibility here and had to be held to account.
Barbara, just remind us about the events on the day that led to these fatalities, because he had clearly had the thoughts in his mind, which he wasn't coping with, and then he tragically turned them into action with devastating consequences for his school.
Yes, that's right. Now, apparently on his cell phone, he had recorded a video talking about his plan or his desire to do this, although he hadn't put it on social media. It was found later. And then, as I said, that drawing was discovered, and it sounded as if he was struggling against some inner urge, the words "help me" on the drawing. But then a couple of hours later, he was sent back to classroom. As I said, the school superintendent said he didn't have a disciplinary record. He hadn't been punished for this. He went into the bathroom and took the gun out of his backpack and loaded it and came out and started shooting. And he killed 4 students and he injured 6 people, including a teacher. And he has been charged as an adult, even though he's 15 years old, which is a very unusual state of affairs as well. Partly, one of the reasons for that, the prosecutor said, is because they did not think this had been an impulsive act, that he had pre-planned it. But also in Michigan, some crimes are so severe that underage people are automatically tried as adults. And one of those is first-degree murder, which is one of the crimes with which he's been charged, as well as terrorism.
Barbara Pletasha there. To the coronavirus pandemic now, and the chief scientist of the World Health Organization says the new Omicron variant could become dominant around the world. The number of countries detecting this variant is increasing every day. But the WHO also says it's too soon to know whether Omicron causes a more serious illness and says people shouldn't panic. The surge in South Africa, where the variant was first identified, has accelerated further. There were more than 16,000 new cases announced on Friday, up from 11,500 the day before. Hospital doctors say there is a higher rate of admissions with illness and with symptoms that require hospitalisation among young children. After Germany announced new restrictions for the unvaccinated on Thursday, the Republic of Ireland has announced limits on the size of attendances at indoor events. It's closed nightclubs and a restriction of no more than 4 households socialising in a private home. This is what that was Micheál Martin there, who was just about to deliver an address to the nation in Dublin ahead of those announcements. Let's take a closer look now at South Africa, where Omicron is spreading at an unprecedented rate. As I said, in the past 24 hours, 11,500 new cases were reported. Just compare that to an average of 300 daily infections 2 weeks ago. South Africa's health minister urged people to get vaccinated.
This 4th wave, which we have started to enter into, can be managed without too many casualties, without too much loss of life, if we all observe the safety measures. The biggest risk being gatherings, especially indoor gatherings.
Well, as more cases emerge, so does the data about the effectiveness of the treatments. Here's the WHO's chief scientist with what we know so far.
It's possible that the Omicron variant is able to overcome and cause infections even in previously vaccinated people. We are seeing that now with a lot of previously vaccinated people who are the first few to be reported with Omicron. However, the fact that they're not getting sick, and again, we have to wait and see, but if they develop only mild illness, that means that the vaccines are still providing protection.
Well, the UK is among several countries offering COVID booster jabs, which will mean some adults have received 3 doses of vaccine. British health chiefs have chosen to use Moderna and Pfizer, and trials suggest they are the 2 which give the best overall response to the vaccine, to the virus. Researchers also said there were good signs the vaccines continue to protect against the Omicron variant. With the latest, our medical editor, Fergus Walsh.
We don't know what's going in, do we?
Amid the gloom over Omicron and its potential threat, some encouraging news. It was back in the summer that nearly 3,000 UK volunteers got one of 7 different COVID vaccines as a booster shot, 3 months after their second dose.
Thank you very much indeed, everybody.
For those boosted with Pfizer after 2 doses of AstraZeneca, their antibody levels were 25 times higher than a control group after 1 month. When Pfizer was given after 2 Pfizer shots, antibody levels rose 8-fold, but from a much higher initial level. Moderna and other combinations also worked well. The study didn't look at Omicron. It has mutations in the spike protein, which may make antibodies less able to bind onto it and prevent infection. But the bigger the antibody army, the better. T cells, another part of the immune system, were also significantly boosted. These can spot and destroy infected cells. The study showed boosters worked well against beta and delta variants, so it's likely they will also protect from serious disease with Omicron.
All of the vaccines actually showed a good T-cell response. For the antibodies, Moderna and Pfizer were very high. We're very hopeful that the vaccines will provide a broad protection against multiple variants, although we can't say for certain at this moment whether they're going to work very well against Omicron or not.
In South Africa, the first real-world evidence has shown Omicron may evade some of our immunity. Scientists have found a surge in the number of people being reinfected with COVID, but there's still real uncertainty about Omicron.
We don't know yet about whether there is genuine immune escape with this variant. We won't know for some time whether people become more unwell with this variant once they're infected. I think we already know that it's more transmissible, but clearly we need even more definitive data on that.
Science is moving fast, but it will take weeks before it's clear just how much of a threat is posed by Omicron. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Authorities in Italy say a man who wanted a COVID vaccination certificate without getting the jab tried using a fake arm. They say he arrived with a silicone mould covering his real arm, hoping it would go unnoticed, but a nurse realised the trick, saying she found the skin rubbery and cold. She reported him to the police, and not just for having rubbery and cold skin. Tens of millions of people are facing severe food shortages across a huge area of East Africa as the region faces its worst drought for many years. Crops have failed. Animals, on which many communities depend, are dying of thirst. There have been 3 years of poor rainfall in northern Kenya, much of Somalia and southern Ethiopia. It's feared the drought will continue long into next year, as a result putting millions of people's lives at risk. Well, the BBC's senior Africa correspondent Anne Soy reports now from northern Kenya.
The devastating impact of drought. This is Wajir in northern Kenya. They've not had enough rain here for 3 consecutive seasons. Water ponds have long dried up. There are dead animals everywhere. Even at Ahmed Ibrahim's home. He's 66 and tells me he's never witnessed anything like this.
The drought has been going on for the last 9 months. I had 150 heads of cattle, but now left with about 30 which are very weak. I also had 400 goats. I'm only left with this few that you can see.
A few times every day, neighbors help to lift the remaining livestock so they can stretch their already weak muscles. Tough decisions he has to make to balance between feeding his family and his livestock.
The remaining livestock will continue dying. But the biggest issue is, what will people eat? People who have lost everything. What will they eat?
That's Saadia's biggest worry too. The 47-year-old mother of 6 is only left with these goats. Livestock are a herder's source of livelihood and wealth. Losing them leaves them poorer and hungry.
I believe God provides, but at this rate, we're at risk of dying because of starvation.
This is the Sabuli Wildlife Conservancy, one of many in northern Kenya, and the effects of drought here are all too clear. And that is a very unusual sight. A dead giraffe inside a wildlife conservancy, and yet we are told that at least 11 of those have been found within months. And it is not just giraffes that are affected, it is all wildlife. There's no pasture, there's no water for them. More frequent droughts suggest climate change is already taking its toll in the region. The impact on people is devastating. Loss of livelihood and a direct threat to survival. Anne Soy, BBC News, Wajir.
Powerful images there of a crisis yet to fully unfold. Scientists in Britain have used gene editing technology to create female-only and male-only litters of mice. They say the technique could eventually be applied to chickens to ensure that only egg-producing females are hatched. Our science correspondent Palab Ghosh has more.
Half of these chicks are useless to the farming industry because they're male and don't lay eggs, so they have to be killed. That problem could be solved thanks to a breakthrough that enables scientists to reprogram animals to produce only females.
Some 6 to 7 billion male layer chicks are killed every year shortly after birth, at a point when they have a nervous system and are capable of suffering. We would like to be able to move to a system where those same eggs are laid, but instead never hatch.
Scientists at the Francis Crick Institute in London have found that the system was successful in mice, and they think it'll work on chickens. The researchers here have found a way of deactivating a gene involved with embryo development. The system can be programmed to stop either male or female embryos from developing using a technique called gene editing. The sex of a mammal is determined by its chromosomes. Females have a pair of X's, males have an X and a Y. The process involves inserting half the gene editing molecule into the father's Y chromosome and the other half into the mother's DNA. After mating, male XY embryos containing both halves of the gene editing molecule will not develop, but female embryos will grow normally. Gene editing can be used to make other genetic changes. These piglets are resistant to a lung disease that often devastates herds. The government is considering whether to allow the use of the technology by the farming industry. Palab Ghosh, BBC News.
Do stay with us on BBC World News. Still to come, how an interpreter who worked with British forces in Afghanistan found a new home in the UK for his family, thanks to the kindness of strangers.
It's quite clear that the worst victims of this disaster are the poor people living in the slums which have sprung up around the factory.
I am feeling so helpless that the children are dying in front of me and I can't do anything.
Charles Manson is the mystical leader of the hippie cult suspected of killing Shaun Ley and at least 6 other people in Los Angeles.
At 11 o'clock this morning, just half a metre of rock separated Britain from continental Europe. It took the drills just a few moments to cut through the final obstacle. Then Philippe Cosette, a miner from Calais, was shaking hands and exchanging flags with Robert Fagg, his opposite number from Dover.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching BBC News. I'm Shaun Ley with the very latest headlines for you. In a rare move, US prosecutors have filed involuntary manslaughter charges against the parents of a teenager accused of shooting dead 4 students at his school. The World Health Organization says vaccine may not be able to prevent people from infection with the Omicron strain of the virus, but they do seem to make its effects far less serious. Now, thousands of people in parts of northeast England and Scotland are still without power 1 week after Storm Arwen left a trail of destruction there. The energy regulator Ofgem has launched an urgent review into the response of the energy network companies. Our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon has been finding out how people have been coping in Aberdeenshire.
In the winter sun, Aberdeenshire looks stunning, but this has been a brutally hard week for many here, and 7 days on from Storm Arwen, its impact is still being felt.
Have you got your power back on again?
No, it's not on yet. No, but it went off on Friday. It's Friday, the day of the wind. Yeah. Oh, there's been trees blowing down a lot before, but I mean, this is worst I've seen.
For some, no power meant no water either. So bottled water was brought in for drinking, and at night this family huddled together for warmth. Like many we spoke to, they were disappointed at the information they'd received.
You just felt like crying sometimes. You couldn't. Like I say, I think it was the false promises as well. That was, we kept getting emails off them saying it'll be on at 6 o'clock, it'll be on at 12 o'clock. And then last night, the army came. It was 2 army blokes came, but that was the first people that's been to check that you're all right. There's nobody. You're just being left to fend yourself. People here rallied around to look out for each other. This farmer receiving hot food from a Good Samaritan, determined to help.
We rely on good friends and good neighbours. Excuse me. We rely on good friends and good neighbours. If it wasn't for these, it wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be good.
You come together as a community?
You have to. You have to. in these difficult times.
Downed power lines meant the local primary school has been shut all week. Children staying at home.
I think one of the best parts has been I've got to play a bunch of board games with my family. One part that I didn't like is my friend's den got destroyed.
And if the power does ever go out again, their mum is determined to be prepared.
I'm ripping out my electric heater, and there'll be a log burner in there and a gas. We won't be left out vulnerable like this again, and we'll have a generator.
Really?
Yeah.
Big changes ahead.
Yeah, definitely.
Engineers have been working round the clock to restore supplies. Tonight, more houses here are finally being reconnected. People will be hoping what's been described as a once-in-a-generation event remains exactly that. Lorna Gordon, BBC News, Crudi in Aberdeenshire.
In Afghanistan, the Taliban has issued a new decree on women's rights. The order says women are not property, but free human beings. It also says women should not be forced or coerced into marriage. But there's no mention of employment rights or education. Sakunda Kamani reports now from Kandahar.
With the rights laid out in this decree, not forcing women into marriages, giving them certain financial guarantees, these have actually been widely accepted parts of Islamic law for hundreds of years. But on the ground, in Afghanistan and many other poorer Muslim countries, they've often not been implemented. To give you an example, in more rural areas here at least, it's not uncommon for women at times to be treated as peace offerings by feuding families, married off in order to end disputes. And women's rights activists here say, look, of course, ending any kind of patriarchal abusive behaviour is a good thing. So if this is implemented, that's something that they welcome. But they've also highlighted that many of these practices had already been outlawed by the previous government. And of course, the most striking thing about this decree is the complete failure within it to mention at all girls' right to education, women's right to work. And that's really fueling suspicion that perhaps this decree is an attempt by the Taliban to simultaneously both appease the international community, which has been very critical of the Taliban's attitude to women's rights, and also carry on appeasing the Taliban's own more hardline elements, which don't want to see women playing any role in public life, it seems. There have been some comments in recent weeks by Taliban representatives suggesting that perhaps all secondary school age girls will be allowed to go back to the classroom next year, but those promises have been rather vague and many people remain very sceptical.
And that was Sakunda Kamani reporting from Kandahar. Staying with Afghanistan, but switching gears to a more heartwarming story. An Afghan man who worked as an interpreter for the British has a new home in the UK, thanks to the generosity of a complete stranger. Lucy Manning has the story.
Oh, I'm so pleased to meet you at long last.
Kindness often repeats itself. Sometimes it only takes one person to change the lives of others. The Vessel family at the end of their long journey to a home.
I'm so pleased to meet you. I'm so pleased to meet you.
When Kabul collapsed, we were just left behind in a dark room.
We first spoke to Burhan, a former interpreter with British forces, when he was hiding in Afghanistan, fearful for his life. A day before the suicide bomb at the airport, he risked the crush there and managed to get his family out.
How are you and all the family doing?
Everyone is okay, and now we are in safety.
Our BBC reports about Burhan resonated. 75 years ago, another British Army interpreter was given refuge from Germany. Helga McFarlane's mother, Helena.
I saw the report of the Afghan refugees coming in from Kabul on the army plane and the story of the Vessel family. And my mother had been a refugee during the Second World War and fled from her home. And she only survived through the kindness of people along the way. And I just felt I had to do something and give back something for the kindness and the humanity that helped my mother and her family survive.
After 100 days in a hotel room together, the night before their move, Sepher and his family, so far from their life in Afghanistan, are finally about to start a new one.
Sepher, how do you feel about going to Aberdeen?
Good.
What are you excited about?
I'm excited about toys.
This is your new house.
From the Taliban a dangerous evacuation, a new country, cramped hotel rooms, to his own bedroom.
Look in there. What do you see? The toys.
Narcis left everything behind, her work as a gynaecologist, her relatives. Now she must start again.
And you make it the way you want it. You change anything, you make it the way you want it.
Your generosity and your kind heart will be never forgotten. No words to express it, but still we have good humans inside this world, and you are an example.
Thank you so much. You're part of our family now.
Thank you so much.
And you're so welcome.
What they say, isn't it? The kindness of strangers. That's it from BBC World News. Thanks for your company.
Hello, an unsettled and wintry weekend of weather on the cards.